Okay guys, hello. Good morning. This is JR and I would like to discuss um, debit and credit in this video. Okay, so understanding debit and credit. Um, Daghang estudyante no, I have a lot of students nga nagalisod even if they are already in higher years and even katong mga graduate o senior high school graduate og ABM strand in their senior high school nagalisod gyapon sila sa pagsabot sa debit and credit kano siya sa gamiton. Okay, that is why I'm creating this video with the following learning outcomes. Wala din ako na-apply sa slide, no, ang learning outcome. So the goal of this video is to teach everyone how to use debit and credit and be able to understand it. So di na nato dugayon, let's go straight into the discussion. So what is debit and credit? So a lot of books, a lot of authors moingon jud sila nga debit is the value received and credit is the value parted with. Okay? For example, na ko'y cellphone, a lot of even my teachers before no sa college, kung na daw sila cellphone, tapos ibaligya daw nila. Okay? Ibaligya nila. So, the cellphone is the credit kasi it was the value parted with. And the money nga nadawat nako in exchange of the cellphone is the debit, which is the value received. Tama man siya. Okay? Tama man siya. However, not all, you will realize, okay, or sa mga estudyante na diha sa accounting, ma-realize ninyo nga sooner or later there are transactions nga dili applicable ang kani nga definition. Say for example, mangutang ka. Okay? So nangutang ko, nga nakadawat og kwarta. Okay? Debit, the value received, kwarta. Kay giutang man ako. What's the credit now? Unsa i-credit nako? The value parted with nangutang. So wala man ko'y gihatag, wala man ko'y gipagawas. Okay? That is why this definition is true, but to some extent, it's really limited. That is why this is a limited definition and there are a lot of instances that it's not entirely applicable, such as sa katong transaction niya ako ang decide. And dagan pa no, dagan pag mga transactions nga murag wala man kay nadawat, nya wala man kay pagawas, wala may value nga nagpart with ka. That is why it's difficult to understand sa katong mga instances unsay gamit aning debit and credit. So for me, debit and credit should always be related to a particular account, okay? Para sa ako mas dali nga walay definition. Okay, mas dali para sa ako ang walay definition nga ani ang debit and credit because in order for us to have a better understanding kung saan yung debit and credit, kailangan dyan na to siya permanently i-relate sa account or sa element. Okay? Its application is dependent on the account identified, whether it's an asset, a liability, equity, revenue, income, expense, and even drawings. Although drawing is not an element, but it's an account nga ma-encounter nato. So basically, before we will try to define or before we attach a definition kung unsang debit and credit, first is kailangan sa nato i-identify kung unsa nga account siya related. Because again, the account will determine the application of the debit and credit. For example, ito. So, I have here the elements or the accounts. An asset. Okay? So, identify sa nato ang asset. Then, unsa ang debit, unsa ang credit. So, when we talk of increasing an asset, then it's debit. When we talk of decreasing an asset, then it's credit. For example, kung magbayad kog kwarta is cash, and cash is an asset. Pag magbayad ko, meaning nagpagawas kog kwarta, nabawasan akong kwarta, then it entails a credit. But if nakadawat kog kwarta, it increased my cash, therefore, the journal entry will require a debit. Okay? What about liability? Utang. Okay? So, if nabawasan ng akong utang, for example, magbayad ko og utang. So, kung magbayad ko og utang, mabawasan akong utang, therefore, kailangan na siya i-debit. Kaya nabawasan man akong utang. What about if nangutang ko? Okay, since nangutang man ko, the liability increase, therefore it will require credit. What about equity? If by the way, equity is the portion of your assets that came from and attributed to the owners. So for example, if ako, owner ko, nag-invest ko og asset sa business, then nadungagan ang akong equity. So since nadungagan man ang akong equity, then it will require a credit because na-increase man. If there are losses, okay, losses are ginabawas man na siya sa equity, so it decreases equity, therefore it will entail a debit. Revenue, if nahalinan ko or if I have rendered services, so nadungagan ang ako ang sales, nadungagan akong income, then credit. So on and so forth. So kana siya. And in order for us to help, no, in order for you nga naminaw karon, mas dali nimo siya ma-remember. So there is this guide, no, nga ginatawag nila nga dealer. Actually bago lang po ko katuonan I have never encountered, siguro gitudlo ni siya sa ako sa among teacher before sa college, but karon lang po na ako siya na discover dyan, no, or na remember. So debit and credit, increase, decrease. So we have here the three accounts which are increased by debit, the DEA, the drawing, the expense, and the asset. And sa kabila naman, we have here the three elements or the accounts decreased by, increased by credit. Okay. Ang na dapat na ako ng kabasig malibog mo, no? So, kaning naa diri sa DEA, these are the accounts increased by debit. And kani sila, these are the accounts increased by credit. So, kung gusto natin na sila bawasan, the opposite, debit. So, kung kani sila, gusto natin na sila bawasan, kailangan natin na sila i-credit. So, again, review na lang, no? So, asset, increase, decrease, debit, credit. Liability, decrease, increase. Equity, decrease, increase. And revenue, decrease, increase. Expense, increase, decrease. Then drawings, increase, decrease. So again, mo ni siya ato ang kodigo. I would suggest that you print this one out or isulat niyo sa papel or even kani kung gusto mo nga mas mubo lang. Either aning duha makatabang na ni siya sa inyo ha in being able to apply debit and credit easier. But kani mas okay yung yapon at least klaro dayon, no. So let us try to apply this knowledge, no. Okay, applying the debit and credit. Steps in applying debit and credit. So I follow these steps in coming up with the journal entry as well as kung unsa ang i-debit, unsa ang i-credit. Number 1, analyze the transaction. Of course, if there is a financial transaction na ginahatag sa inyong teacher or being post or being applied sa inyong mga respective business, you have to analyze first. Okay, and in your analysis, you have to identify the accounts present. What are the accounts present in the transaction? What are the accounts that are being affected by the transaction? Okay? If ma-extract na nimo unsang accounts ang naa dira, then you have to identify whether the account was increased or decreased because of the transaction. For example, if you have identified that there is cash, dungagan ba or nabawasan ang cash? If there is accounts payable, dungagan ba or nabawasan ang accounts payable? And the fourth is kung ma-identify na nimo unsa nga account and whether increase or decrease ka, refer na lang ka sa guide, tan-aw na lang ka sa kodigo, and you will now identify whether i-debit ba siya or i-credit. So take for example, ito. George, the owner, invested 100,000 cash in his business. So let us try to analyze. So George, the owner, take note, no, when trying to come up with a journal entry, always remember that we are recording in behalf of the business and not in behalf of the owner. Okay, so in this case, si owner, nagbutang daw siya kwarta sa cash as a business amounting to 100,000 cash. Therefore, the business received 100,000 cash. So, What are the accounts that are affected by this transaction? Um, number one is, of course, cash, and the second is capital. Bakit cash? Because again, it involved a 100,000 cash nga invest niya sa business, and capital because the cash or the asset came from the owner. And since gikan man siya sa owner, then it will affect the capital. Third, identify whether the account increased or decreased. Okay. So again, we are recording in behalf of the business, and since the business received 100,000 cash, therefore the cash of the business increased. And what about capital? The capital also increased. Nga naman, kay ang investment sa tag-iya nadungagan man, therefore ang capital account also increased. And since na-identify naman nato unsa nga account and unsa ang effect, then if we go back to our kodigo, okay? By the way, cash is an asset. So asset man daw siya tapos nadungagan, nag-increase daw, therefore debit. And the other thing is capital. Capital is an equity account tapos nadungagan po daw siya, then credit. That is why in our step number 4, cash is an asset tapos nadungagan daw, therefore debit. Capital is an equity account tapos nadungagan po daw, credit. That is why our journal entry is debit cash 100,000, credit George Capital 100,000. Then explanation is to record George investment. Okay? So if klaro na siya, then that's good. However, if it is quite dili siya kayo klaro, then you may ask me in the comment section. Now, another illustration. Purchase an equipment paying cash amounting to 20,000. Okay, let's analyze the transaction. Again, the business here purchased an equipment. Tapos, the equipment amounted to 20,000 pesos. And again, the equipment is valued at 20,000 and nagbayad siya og cash 20,000. Next, identify the accounts that are present. Of course, kay involved man dyan ang cash, okay? Pag nagan paying cash or paid nga term, then automatically it will involve cash. So, naanday cash nga account as well as equipment because nagpalit man tag equipment. Third, identify whether the accounts increase or decrease. For the cash, kay nagbayad man ta, nagpagawas tag kwarta, therefore nabawasan siya. For the equipment, since kita man ang nagpalit, then the equipment in our books, in our records increased. So if we go back to our Codigo, by the way, cash and equipment are both assets. So for the cash, nga asset siya, nag-decrease man daw, therefore the cash will be credited. And for the equipment, which is also an asset, nag-increase man daw siya, therefore it will be debited. Therefore, in our number 4, cash is an asset, tapos nabawasan, credit according to our Codigo. Then equipment, also an asset, nadungagan. Then according to our Codigo, debit. Therefore, our journal entry is equipment, debit, equipment, 20,000 pesos. Then cash, 20,000 pesos. Then explanation na naman to record the purchase of equipment. And basically, that's it. Unzip. I hope that you were able to understand debit and credit, its definition, as well as its on how they should be applied in journal entries. So again, if you have questions, let me know in the comment section. And if there are certain topics that you want me to further discuss, then I'll try. I'll see to it. So thank you so much and God bless.